Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for showing up. This week we're going to look at step 5, admitting to God, to ourselves and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Jacinta's going to do a couple of readings to do with the how it's worded in the AA Big Book, and then I'll share my experience about how it's worked for me and others I've sponsored and how I've done my own step 5. Thank you.
Okay. It's from chapter 6, Into Action. This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we've done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reason why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives, trying to avoid this humbling experience. They have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egotism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty. In this sense, we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he does not deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does in his sprees. Coming to his senses, he is revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension that makes for more drinking. So we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look at the world in the eye. We can be alone in perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our hearts that we know Him better. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the steps, the stones, properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundations? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6.
I think that's the reading there says an awful lot. This is where you're going to start enjoying the spiritual experience. So the instructions suggest to us that we find someone we can trust. These days, I think it's usually a sponsor you do your 5th step with. And it's seriously, I've been party to hearing 5th steps and doing 5th steps. And it's a serious honor that someone should come to you and, share their innermost stuff, secrets and what else. So, yeah, I think you should think carefully before you pick someone to do it with. And it's good to find somewhere good to do it with. I mean, I've been part of these that they've taken 8 or 9 hours at times, you know. And so you need to be somewhere comfortable. You're not going to be disturbed. Yeah, it's a good idea to bring your 4th step along and the AA people. And so there's 2 parties. There's 2 parties involved. There's someone that's going to listen to this 4th step, and someone that's going to share their 4th step, which constitutes the 5th step. Quite often when I do it, I'll suggest, why are we here? You know, what have we come to do here? What either party's role in this is, you know, as suggested, you know, you'll be looking for patterns of thinking and behaviour, and you'll be looking for where any defects you didn't pick up in the 4th step. The person who's listening to this can help you with that. In that reading we've just done, my absolute favourite piece in the big book is, well, there's 2 pieces I'm very fond of, but this, you know, where they talk about only think they've lost their ego and fear. That's really what you're after here. You're also after trying to, once you get all this junk out of the way, my experience is that then you do feel the closeness of the Creator, because the junk's out of the way. This is all the stuff that's between you, all those bits and pieces, your defects, things you might have got up to, grisly bits and pieces. You know, most of us have carry shame and guilt, as we suggested last week, to do with resentments, fears, and sexual behaviours, both past, present, and future, really. So, yeah, have a little discussion while you're here. You might take a prayer or a chant together, or, you know, this is, you get a real chance. Though there's great instructions, you get the chance to customise it a bit. I remember I was doing a step that a guy I sponsored for many years, and we got so late we had to order pizzas in. So we ended up the 5th step gobbling some pizzas late at night because it got so late. So the other party here is, you might ask them to shine a light on your defects or character traits. You know, if it doesn't work, defects don't work so well for you, you can use character traits. Don't think it makes a great difference. So, as they say, so you found your venue, you found the person to share your 5th step with, so we pocket our pride and go to it. Again, if you start with your resentments, and then you do your fears, and then your section and fatigue, and then if there's a 4th piece of paper with something that doesn't quite fit into them, we get on with it. Again, there's kind of feeling here with 2 people coming together to do this particular step. It's quite brilliant, really. You know, I've heard many, and I've shared many, including mini ones here and there. I always felt better. I always felt that kind of nearness of the Creator stuff. You know, I think further on they talk about we enter a new dimension. And that's certainly how it was for me. The last one I did was a few years ago, not exactly sure, 4 or 5 possibly. I had a crack at the steps recently, but it just wouldn't go. It just didn't seem to go. I had 2 resentments. I think I had 1 fear, maybe not, and a tiny bit of sexual behaviour. Now, when you first come around, you're probably going to have a bit more than that. Just get on with it. Again, tea or what is suggested, or whatever you like to drink, water, and we go through them all. We're looking for patterns, we're looking for traits, we're looking for character defects. You might find a name or 2 for your amends list during the discussions. And when we're finished, we can go home, sit quietly. It's just, I remember doing this a couple of times, just the amazing experience, just sitting on my own, reviewed what I got up to and what I'd learned. And it's just a nice experience, and go through the first 5 steps, seeing if we've forgotten or omitted anything. It's a good thing to do these days. You can just pick up the phone and anything you may have forgotten or want to get off your chest. But when the person is doing the 5 steps finished, I always ask them, is there anything else you want to dump here? Is there anything you want to get off your chest and leave here? More often than not, there is. So you go home, you review it, and then it's kind of job done, really. But the more religious amongst us, you can thank God, and you should be, like I've suggested, this kind of feelings to these steps. You should be really feeling freedom now. Maybe not straight away, but the next day, sometimes you feel a lot of it, and then the next day you come down a little bit. But in general, you should be lighter, mentally, emotionally. It's often the stuff some of the stuff we hold energetically in our bodies is, they probably didn't talk about that then when they knew it, but it's stuff I've certainly learned and others learned since. You can often be at dis-ease. So a lot of that should have left. And as suggested, you probably find small defects or patterns. That's really what you're after. That's really what you're after. I can't think. It's got a really nice vibe to this. I can't really think of much more. I don't think I've admitted anything. You usually get to know the other person pretty well. It becomes like spiritual friends and unions, and when you realise you're pretty much the same as everybody else, and they're the same as you. It's a very humbling step. I've learned to, or how I describe the word humble, is truthful. It's something I learned along the way from one of those teachers out there. For me, it's not about wandering around with a begging bowl. It's very much about humility. It's very much about the truth. When you share this step, it's about the truth, which usually means you're pretty much like your fellow beings. You've got up to some bits and pieces here. Now it's time to leave that behind. Take the learnings, patterns, defects, etc., etc. Now move on. What's the principle? Integrity. I thought it was, but I didn't want to say it in case I was wrong. The principle is integrity, putting things right. So I think that's good enough. Let's open it for questions or observations or heckling, as you wish. So, yeah. Are there any questions?
I've got a question from Jessie. She was wondering how your experience of how to choose somebody to do your step 5 with. She was wondering whether you've done your step 5s with different people or the same people, and also in the big book it says that you can choose someone who hasn't worked the 12 steps themselves. So what was your experience with that?
Well, I've done one with my first sponsor. A gentleman is no longer with us, where he done it the way they were doing it in the treatment centres back then. In other words, he read through it and gave me some feedback. And then when I met the guy who sponsored me for about 10 or 12 years, I've done it with him. I was thinking this morning, because obviously I knew it was about step 5 today, that I did it on Richmond Green with this guy, and we went down into his basement room that had lovely patio windows right across. We actually got this sofa about 2 doors down. But more to the point, a little robin showed up, which has often showed up in my life when I move or I'm about to move. A little robin showed up. I've done it with people I've sponsored along the way. As I said, they've got smaller for me. That's not saying they haven't been more powerful. My experience is, as you go along, the stuff that comes up is usually more powerful. In the beginning, it's the big old rocks in the road, right? Bigger that you have to manhandle out of the way. As the further you go on, it's like little grains of sand that get caught between your toes. I did it with a guy one day. I took it to a meeting. I knew I was meeting an old mate, and we went to his flat and done it after the meeting. So probably 3 or 4 people. For me, because of the more grisly stuff is out of the way, it doesn't really matter to me too much. It's important to try and smash out the fear and the ego and become a bit humble. Now, if something came up during the day, I'd probably share it with Jacinta, or I guess it wouldn't bother me too much if I'm really, really honest. It's my stuff is not that precious to me anymore. I very, very seldom catch a defect in the moment I look. So yeah, it is important. They say that's one of the things that's changed since the beginning, is now there's people around who may not be 12-step people that understand it. I think, I always try and stay away from opinions when I do this. Yeah, I think you're probably better off with somebody who's done the step themselves. But who knows? You know, if you've got a spiritual mate, or I guess I'd suggest that you stick with someone who might, you know, have an understanding of how all this works. Kind of, these things seem to work out once you change direction at the third step. So these kind of things work out. And you're after any man's patterns and another look at your defects or character traits. So does that, you know, I mean, sometimes you just have to use what was there. That's how I ended up going to a meeting, and we're still friends. I'm still friends with the guy. I ended up leaving the meeting and going off to do step 5 at his house. So if you stick with the same person, it helps. They kind of get to know your patterns. If you move around a bit, you get other stuff. They see things perhaps that other people haven't seen. As long as you get an understanding of where you're at, I don't think you have to be. You got to be careful, but I don't think you have to be over cautious here. You know, give God, give the Creator, your higher power, a chance here. So does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you. Okay, James, I have a question. How much input from the sponsor or the person listening to the step 5 would you suggest?
Well, you can kind of set it. You kind of set ground rules up. You know, you can say, I appreciate your feedback. You know, as I said, you can customize this a little. You know, so when I do them, because you're not sitting in judgment, you're only there to listen and feedback in a useful, helpful, spiritual way. You know, you're not judge and jury here. So you can, I don't know, you may say to them, look, any patterns you see, any defects that are glaring, you know, I'd like you to feed me back. Again, I've done them where people have fed me back quite a bit, and I've done them when they said almost dead silent. As long as you get the job done, I've done, you know, you kind of make a deal with it. You know? It's like painting a wall. You can paint it and stay dead silent, or you can paint it and say a lot. As long as the person doing the 4th step gets their opportunity to get it out, that's in proper order, I may add, in a way that's positive, that you can learn from. Very spiritual step. They may remind you, if you do the work regularly with the same person, they may well remind you, you know what, that came up last time. I had a particular resentment with the NHS. It just kept coming for years, really. Is that good?
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question, James. What do you kind of recommend, or what can you do if someone's struggling to sort of see or feel or understand their defects? Maybe in general, but maybe just sort of with, you know, some of the resentments.
Well, you can share your experience. You know, I used to do that. I did, especially in sexual infantry. You know, I would often share some of the stuff I'd got up to. I didn't really want to be front page news, and you can kind of ease it out. You know, if the same resentment keeps coming, or the same fear keeps coming, just share your own experience. You know, as I've suggested, this is a real level at this step. You'll find you're probably not better than anyone else, and you'll probably find you ain't much worse than anyone else. You generally get up to the same shenanigans. We generally have a lot of the same fears. Resentments move about a bit. You know, I've sponsored a lot of men and women, and you know, a lot of the sexual stuff's pretty much the same as well. You know, I was told when I started this work that I'd hear about murderers and rapists. I've not heard any murders yet. No, it's an exercise in sorting out the stuff so you can have a more pleasant and happy and fulfilled life, really. You know, I'm sure that nearly everybody I know holds on to these weird secrets, and I'm sure when they let them go, you know, the truth will set you free. I think it's really useful for the fear stuff. I did a exercise. I was about 6 years in. So a lot changed for me. 6 years. You know, I had to grin and bear a fair bit before then, and I did this big old mind map, and I worked out that most of my defects, it talks about in the big book, that came from fear. You know, laziness, fear. You know, fear was just behind nearly every defect that came up. Can't quite think of an example right now, but procrastination, that's the one. You know, I'd procrastinate with stuff so I didn't get judged of what I was doing, or you know, I was lazy because I didn't want to do something. You know, pretty much all my fears, you know, all my character defects traced back to fear. some sort of other, you know. The resentment's often had a pan, a lot of it based in childhood. And I can say this now, it wasn't so then, but the sexual stuff's just the sexual stuff, you know. And then, you know, you work the way we work it, you get a chance to change a lot of this stuff in the 6th step with God, which I'll talk about next week. So how does that answer that, Helen?
Thank you.
James, question. I remember the first time I did the steps, I went home afterwards and I read that paragraph from the big book, and I found it all sat with me that I had done it well to that point. You know, I'd done the first 5 steps. I was ready for step 6. I just felt in me, I knew I had done my best. You know, one of the times I've done the steps recently, when I went to read that paragraph, I felt something in me. I hadn't done it fully right to that point. You know, it came to me that I hadn't fully done the step 3 prayer right. And I didn't know whether to continue on with the steps or to go back and go back to step 3. I don't know what you'd say about that.
Well, that's why you go through it. You know, that instruction isn't there for fun, and you know, more will be revealed. That's, you know, I caught recently about 2 months back. There was a period in my recovery where I was probably a little bit more shaky than I gave myself credit for. I wasn't going to pick up. I was more shaky than I thought I was. You know, I think with step 3, it's an ongoing process. So you know, depending on how much commitment you can put into, how much faith, you know, things will pop up. Like, for instance, I don't want to get carried away here, but when I cracked out a few of the amends, other ones were right behind them. So sometimes we think we're rock solid in an area, and you know, I heard it put like this: the ego will always attack where you think you've got your stuff together the most. So you might be wandering around saying, I've got this cracked, I've got that cracked. Well, that's where the ego. And once you've let go of a lot of stuff, it will, which is what the 5th step's got a lot to do with. You'll probably see the cracks and other stuff that you hadn't seen before. So you might think, oh, I'm not got quite as much faith as I thought I had, or I'm carrying more fear, or I haven't, which might be the case with this. Oh, I haven't done this as well as I thought I would. Well, I don't need to tell you guys, we're quite often our worst critics. More often than not, you do quite a good job, or very good job. But the old ego and fear and will be there trying to tell you that you haven't done your best. It will come out in the wash. You know, this is a guarantee. If you keep doing it, it will come to the surface. Mm-hmm. I mean, the guys who encouraged us through this work recommended about once a year that you go through the steps. My experience from that is we have different patterns. I had 9 months for a long time. I must have done 6, 7 sets of steps at 9 months. Then it dropped out of 2 years. You know, I think I've said this before, and then 3 or 4 years. The last time was about 5 years ago. So, yeah. Don't let your critical mind or fear diminish the experience of the 5th step. It's a very intimate, spiritual, powerful step.
Thank you.
Any more to do with this or any other steps?
Do you have anything to say about the kind of the nature of resentment itself? I guess what, you know, why we're so prone to resentments and yeah, and sort of what perpetuates them and what gives them such power?
That's a good question. Well, I think it's resentment. So it's resent. Someone does something or we do something and it keeps coming, it keeps getting resent. The easiest way to classify is anger. And predominantly, not all the time, it will come, it's a pattern. So someone does, you know, it's like we had something stolen recently and I was angry. It reminded me of other stuff I'd had stolen. So it's something that it's kind of an emotional logjam. And it will usually have a pattern to it. Again, sometimes you get a new one pops in. This is also to do with resentments with self, you know. Oh, I've done that again, you know. Oh, I'm in another nuts relationship. But as you go along and you kind of see your patterns, it just gets easier. And, you know, there's some big stuff to forgive out there. But the best thing is to try and see your part in the resentment, as we discussed last week, you know. So there's a person, place, institutions you're angry with, the cause, what does it affect in you, and what mistake did you make? You know, this is definitely how it suggests in the big book, and a lot of the work I've done with people in all places. We're sensitive people. I could suggest that we try and work towards being less sensitive. It's not something I suffer so much now, but in the early days, you'd only have to look at me the wrong way. Yeah, try and get the truth. See what's going on. More often than not, you'll see, as we've been discussing, it's a pattern. It's minor, you know. It's just recent. You've seen in the spiritual books, you know, sometimes you keep getting dealt the same circumstance until you deal with it. Yeah, as a young man, I was quite handy with my fists. Because it started off like that, I got self-esteem out of it. I quite liked it, if I'm honest. I was pretty good at it. But you know, when you're 30 years of age and you're starting to act that behaviour is, you know, it's no good. It's just a pattern. So there was things I'd let get under my skin, angry. You know, these days I'm not angry about very much. We're going to talk more about that next week and how to change it. Yeah, how to change these defects. Does that help?
Thanks.
You can say no.
I did. I was nodding actually. Yes.
I'm having a bit of fun with everybody, you know.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You know, I'd probably get over it, you know. You wouldn't end up on my resentment. Yeah, a small apology to all those who I'm going to stop speaking now. That I didn't make the meeting last night. I got banging on with an old recovering mate, and we'd had a nice supper, and we were talking about all the people we knew, and yeah, I just couldn't get out of the room really. So apologies. Any other questions or observations? Heckling? Maybe I'll share an example. I went to a very strict Catholic Jesuit school, and you know, I caused them as much trouble as I could, and you know, we were probably even so we were battered really. You know, we was being corporal punished and starved, you know, and I looked at my part in it. Well, I robbed the school when I left, robbed the woodwork and metalwork department, took all the tools. And so I went back and I made amends and gave them a check for the amount, possibly more. And after I'd done that, it took a while. I'm talking years. But I saw how abusive their part was. and as I'm able to do now, I could speak about it honestly and more in a more real way. You know, very abusive people, very abusive institution, you know, and it's like I forgave me and I forgave them and I moved on, you know. But that I now get to speak about that institution in a way that's more balanced, that's more real. That, you know, and there was just so much resentment towards the way these guys treated us. You know, I guess these days it's for their resentment, infantry. But I couldn't have had a balanced view, a more real view to I carried out. I put right what was wrong in my world. There's a resentment. Well, we were talking last night, interesting enough, going back over a lot of characters that we knew. And it's a little bit more common known now that, you know, if you're carrying around a load of anger and angst, even fear, it will affect your physical, mental, and emotional state. So the more of this stuff you can clear, the hospital beds are full of people holding on to deep resentment and anger. You know, this wasn't so much well known to recent times. And the more of that you can let go, the better for you and those around you. Anything else?
It's just coming to me. Sometimes in the step fives I've been part of, it's been helpful to me, I think, and to others maybe, to have like this acknowledgement that you know, because obviously you're looking for your own, you know, it's a fact-finding mission, and you're looking for your part, your defects, and all that. But in the course of the step five, often comes up what other people have done to you. You know, it just comes up if they're still holding on to the anger. You know, just wondering your thoughts. Do you think it's important to kind of make sure they're not taking too much responsibility for things that they don't have to, and you know,
100%. It's a balancing, you know. Yeah, 100%. You know, we tend to just take sometimes too much responsibility, and other times we don't take enough. It's a balancing out. You know, that's what I was saying about the school thing. You know, they were seriously abusive people, but until I put my side of the street right, I was giving them too much power. It's also worth mentioning here while I think about it that I get asked on a regular basis what about the assets? Well, by all means, make an asset list. The way I've learned to do it is if now you've got a list, it's not a full list of people you've harmed and willing to make amends to. Probably the willingness hasn't, but we'll say the amends list. And the defect, this character trait, is that once you work with God on these defects, and it's one of the things that this method really doesn't keep you shortchanged. If you look at the AA Big Book, there's 2 little paragraphs on step 6 and step 7. Yeah? But incidentally, they're different steps. But if you work your defects hard with the methods we show you in the guidance, you will not be able to keep your assets down. We've got someone who's flying right now. You know who it is. She's worked very, very hard, and lots of stuff are opening for her right now. She's reacquainted with a professional staff, got visions of doing some big stuff in Ireland. Life's beyond the world. Try not to speak for other people, but she's in a very kind and loving relationship. All stuff she never dreamed of. Now, let's just take the defect of fear. Most of that was what's held us back from the life of our wildest dreams. Or resentment, or sexual history, and etc. So this is the stuff that's holding you back. I'm not suggesting do not do an assets list. What I'm suggesting strongly is when you start to clear with the Creator your defects, you won't be able to stop. It's like watering the garden. By the next morning, it'll be flourishing. This is my experience with working with people. And when they talk about, we only thought we'd lost our ego and fear, it won't flourish so much when you've got a lot of that ego and fear stuff about. When you kind of get on this broad highway they talk about. My personal experience is amazing. I was talking to this old timer friend last night, and some of the stuff we've known one another since the really early days, and some of the stuff we've managed to get up to and experience and get over has been phenomenal. It's going to start getting interesting now in the next 2 steps, because we're going to demonstrate how to get through a lot of this stuff. This is the start here, though. Last night we were discussing how's the 5th step. There's not much to say about it. I think I probably spoke more about this than the others. Important step. Important someone knows all our story. Important we hear our story and find out what's holding us back. Do we have any more?
We're nearly at the end of the meeting time. So,
I thought that.
okay. Well, thank you very, very much, James. We're going to stop the recording now.
Thank you.